What's up guys, hope everyone is doing well. Today's video review is going to be about the Moondrop Blessing 2. This is a $300 hybrid IEM that is running 4 balanced armatures and 1 dynamic driver. Moondrop itself is sort of an upstart chi-fi company that's sort of notorious for their, let's just say, interesting marketing. I'm not gonna lie, it's highly effective crossover marketing for weebs like myself, but it doesn't even matter because their lineup is insanely consistent and the Moondrop Blessing 2 bears no exception to this rule. On the topic of crossover, and for my regular viewers mainly, audio is actually my other hobby, so I'm thinking about bringing some headphone reviews and stuff like that to the channel in the future. I'm not 100% sure how that's actually going to pan out, but I'll still definitely be bringing the regular EDC gear content as usual. With that being said, follow along as I explain why these are currently one of my favorite IEMs, and no, I swear it's not just because of the tasteful waifu art. Okay, so here's the box that the Blessing 2 comes in, and it's actually quite big. I was kind of surprised by the size of it. And in the front, you can see that you have your waifu art here, and then in the back, there's a split diagram of the IEM itself. So yeah, nothing special to write home about, and neither are the accessories, but this waifu art, this is fine art right here. I am saving this box, as I do with all my other packaging. Okay, so moving on to the stock cable, this thing is acceptable at best. There's no chin slider here, and that definitely comes in handy if you're moving around a lot. This Y-split is also pretty tacky in my opinion. It's a lot larger relative to most other Y-splits, and it sort of impedes the function of the cable if you're wrapping it around your hand like so. Now moving on to the case, this one is also sort of interesting. It's clearly too big to pocket carry, but I also don't dislike it, simply because of how much capacity it has. You could even fit a small dap in here if you have one, and there's plenty of room for your accessories here. Now, to be fair, I also don't pocket carry my IEMs anyways, so this is a pretty decent case in my opinion. The build quality of the Blessing 2 itself is pretty good in my opinion. The gap between this acrylic shell here and the stainless steel faceplate is next to seamless, and there's also no inconsistencies to either of the surfaces. Now, something more minute that I want to give attention to is the laser engraving process Moondrop is using. And it is very, very good and quite detailed, as you can see on this waifu I have engraved here. So yeah, I actually didn't have a choice in my waifu because I bought these secondhand, but it doesn't change the fact that the engraving process is incredibly detailed. And if I can get the camera to focus, you can see that the laser engraving has even picked up the individual lines in the scarf and the mitten here, which is impressive to say the least. So while the laser engraving process doesn't go strictly hand in hand with the physical build quality of the IEMs, it sure is nice to see that Moondrop cares and is paying attention to the little details as well. Okay, so just so I'm not wasting anybody's time, more than I already have at least, let's address the elephant in the room. And that's that the Blessing 2 were literally made for people with elephant ears. There's no other way around it, and I'm not lying when I say this. These are literally bigger than any other IEM I've ever owned, and fit issues are only exacerbated by an enormous 6.5mm nozzle size. If you have smaller ears, definitely demo these first. I actually thought I had smaller ears, but they fit quite nicely in my ears, and I can keep them in for like 2-3 hours at a time without too much issue. Like I said, if you have smaller ears, definitely demo these to make sure they fit, or you can do what I did, drop $300, blind buy it, and hope for the best. I definitely recommend option 1, the demo, but it'd be like that sometimes with option number 2, of course. Okay, so let's talk about the most important thing, and that is the actual sound. My testing methodology consists of FLAC files off of a Shanling M0, the stock tips, and the stock cable. Now, for what it's worth, I think burn-in is about as real as the 5G COVID hoax. However, I do have around 50 hours on them at this point, and they have not changed in sound to my ears at all. So yeah, take that for what you will, and let's dive into the sound analysis. Okay, so I'm just going to wear the Blessing 2 so it looks like I have a decent visual at least, and it doesn't get stale. Anyways, starting with the low end, the Blessing 2 is going to be taking advantage of that dynamic driver. There's a slight bass boost, it's not quite as fast as some balanced armatures, and it's a bit less controlled. Of course, the trade-off here is that it's a hell of a lot more natural, and you don't get that plasticky texture that's often associated with BAs. That being said, I do think that the Blessing 2's bass is sort of in a weird spot, for lack of a better phrase. It lacks sub-bass extension, and there's also very little texture to the bass itself. So yeah, definitely stay away if that's your thing, or you're just a bass head in general. Overall, the bass isn't what I would call great, but more than acceptable by most standards. Okay, so moving on to the mids, this is where I think the Blessing 2 really shines. Vocals are smoothed and slightly pushed forward. They're not quite in your face, but this means that they're always present in the mix. Moondrop's target curve specifically plays well with female vocals, so if that's a priority, definitely check out the Moondrop Blessing 2 or any Moondrop IEM for that matter. They should be on your list. This is also why Moondrop tends to be the go-to choice for weebs. For the highs, I find the treble to be airy, detailed, and with good extension. Some people have mentioned that they hear some peakiness going on in the upper treble, but honestly I've never noticed this, so your mileage might vary for what it's worth. Just putting it out there. That being said, I do notice some coloration going on here, some of that BA timbre, but nothing that I would consider a deal breaker by any means. Overall, this is a neutral, slightly bright sound signature to my ears. It's pretty agreeable, and unless you're pretty picky, I think it would be hard to find fault with it, honestly. Tone aside, let's talk about technicalities. Resolution and detail retrieval are pretty much par for the course, maybe punching a little bit above its price range. The mid-range in particular is very good though, and I would say it's on par with IEMs that are several times its price, honestly. I'm sort of split on the staging though. Some people have said it's above average, others have said it's below average. Personally, I think it's just average, but yeah, take that with a grain of salt for what it's worth. Something everyone can agree on, however, is that the imaging on these is very good. It's very easy to distinguish between specific instruments and where they're coming from specifically on the soundstage. Alright, so let's talk conclusions. I want to switch it up here and compare the Blessing 2 with my only flagship IEM, the 64 Audio U12T, which clocks in at a cool $2,000. Sure, not a fair comparison, but it should also be a testament to where I think the Blessing 2 stands in the mix. If you can't tell already, I'm actually quite the beginner in audio. Yet, despite the wonderful thing that is diminishing returns, even to me, there's quite an obvious divide between something like the U12T and the other mid-fi IEMs that I've listened to. Now, this is just my subjective opinion, but I think the Blessing 2 here closes this gap significantly. It makes less mistakes, has better tonality, and equal if not better technicalities to all the other mid-fi stuff I've heard. And so, the million-dollar question, does this make the Blessing 2 a quote-unquote giant killer? And the answer to this is hell no, far from it. The U12T is the clear winner on all fronts, sans perhaps the slightly less natural bass response because it's a full balansometer setup. Plus, when you want the best sound possible, price tends to take a backseat anyways. But there's a big caveat here, and it's that the Blessing 2 comes pretty close for the price. If the Blessing 2 isn't quite up to flagship IEM standards, it can be forgiven for being one of the best performers on the market at its price point, and for also going toe-to-toe with some of the mid-fi big boys, which encompass the sub $1,000 range. So yeah, just in a vacuum, I think the Blessing 2 are good. On the market, I think they shift the mid-fi paradigm and what one can expect for $300. And don't just take my word for it, I also highly encourage you to check out some other reviewers' thoughts. There's definitely a bit of a hype train and some circle jerk going on right now, but even some of the most critical reviewers are singing this IEM's praises. Anyways, I hope you guys found this video review informative, and if you did, be sure to hit that like button and to subscribe for future content. It really helps the channel grow. Peace out.